The night hummed with tension as the crescent moon hung low, casting eerie shadows across the empty fields. It was a quiet night, almost too quiet, as an unsettling feeling crept through the calm like a whisper carried by a breeze. Down in the valley, nestled between quietly rustling corn stalks and the sprawling patches of bare earth, stood an old farmhouse. The kind of place you'd find in a storybook, a home filled with unspoken secrets. In that old house lived a farmer named Charlie. To the naked eye, he was nothing more than a simple man, his hands calloused from years of labor and his overalls frayed at the edges. The townspeople saw him as just that, a farmer, tending to his land, living a life of solitude. But beneath the surface lay a vibrant current of something more, something they would soon learn when the light of the moon revealed its truth. It began, as these things often do, with a misplaced glance. A few members of the mob loitered at the edge of town, murmuring about debts and dirty deals. They were men of shadows, hardened by crime. Charlie's farm was not on their radar until one of them, Tony the Fly Adario, mentioned it, seemingly out of boredom. They were drawn to that serene face of the farmhouse, unsuspecting. "Let's pay the farmer a visit," one of them sneered, his mind spinning with easy money and blatant disregard for the hardworking man. Little did they know, tonight would unfold differently than any of them expected. Under the soft golden glow of a lamp inside the farmhouse, Charlie sat at the worn wooden table, meticulously arranging old photographs. Each picture held a piece of his past, a childhood spent laughing in the fields, his beloved wife, who had passed years ago, and memories of a daughter now far away in the city. He sighed, the weight of nostalgia pulling at him. But tonight was different. He sensed trouble lurking just outside his door. The air felt charged, thick with anticipation, as though the universe itself could feel the shift. The mob approached with heavy boots thudding against the earth, a rhythm of impending chaos. They joked amongst themselves, confidence glimmering in their eyes as they neared the worn iron gate of the farmhouse. "This should be easy," Tony chuckled, tapping his knife against his palm. He imagined the exchange would be swift, the grab, the go, the game. Yet deep inside, a quiet trepidation nestled into his gut. Meanwhile, Charlie wasn't idle. He knew every inch of his land, every creak of the floorboards. He listened, heart pounding as their words drifted through the open window. He took a deep breath and rose from the table, his movements calm yet deliberate. He had a secret, one he never planned to employ, but one that was engraved in him like the stories of his ancestors. As the men approached the door, Charlie slipped on a weathered pair of boots, moving with the stealth of a seasoned soldier. There was a certain wisdom in his years of labor. The touch of the earth had made him perceptive. He knew that death lurked on the outskirts of the farm. It was a visceral kind of knowing, a connection that came from living life with intention. With a heart full of resolve, he grasped the handle of an old shotgun that had rusted in the corner. "Guess he ain't home," Tony said, shoving the door with a careless shove, but the door creaked open, revealing Charlie's strong silhouette standing steady against the warm light behind him. The room felt both inviting and haunting, like a comfortable embrace on a stormy night. Charlie offered a small smile, confident yet guarded. His voice rolled like thunder. The mob halted in their tracks, surprised by the poised demeanor of a man they had intended to intimidate. "Just looking for a little chat," Tony said, feigning casualness, though the tension danced between them like a flickering flame. "Could have fooled me," Charlie replied, his eyes narrowing a fraction, reminiscent of the storm clouds darkening over the horizon. In that moment his presence felt like an anchor. The atmosphere rippled with something unnameable, charged with a tension that left the mob on edge. "Listen, old man," another thug pushed forward, eyes gleaming with malicious intent. "We know you've got something valuable stashed away." Charlie stepped back, allowing the light to envelop him. "You want what? My old photographs, my stories, because that's all I have of value." The bravado in his voice confused the men. Surely he was bluffing. Tony barked, raising his knife. "We're not playing games here, farmer." Rage simmered behind his eyes, and for a moment it looked like he'd leap forward, seasoned by crazy flickers of violence. He turned away, his heart racing, a plan forming. The mob underestimated him just as they had underestimated the power that lay within knowledge. Seizing the moment, he moved towards a weathered cupboard where he kept more than just dishes. It was a place of memories. He reached for his most prized possession, a worn leather journal. He said, voice low, each word weaving through the air with intent. He flipped it open, revealing pages filled with sketches, diagrams of the land, his dreams, and perhaps most importantly, the truths of the past. It wasn't what they eagerly sought, but in his hands it transformed into his sword, a shield against their ignorance. Tony quipped, still eyeing Charlie with suspicion. He felt the energy shift as he laid bare the deepest truths of hard work, sacrifice, and the legacy of family that rippled through those pages. This land was built on sweat and blood. It has stories older than your little gang. The mob stared, caught between disbelief and curiosity. Charlie took a breath and laid the journal down, a quiet smirk playing on his lips. Go on, open it. As Tony took a hesitant step forward, something shifted. The realization that they weren't dealing with a mere farmer nagged at them like an itch. There was fire behind Charlie's words, unyielding like the roots beneath the earth, intertwining with the very essence of what it meant to fight for one's place. The mob didn't come to rob just anything. They had come to dictate the lives of others. Suddenly, Charlie's posture altered, a sense of gravity thickening the air. This farm may look simple, but it is my wisdom and resilience that you underestimate. The words echoed against the walls. It was a powerful moment, a battle of wills brewing underneath the surface. He urged Tony again, eyes burning with a fervor he had not anticipated. The man, caught up in the moment, finally flipped open the journal. It was a road map of Charlie's existence, detailing the trials and triumphs of every season. There were graphs outlining crop yields, handwritten calculations of what each planting had generated, and notes about the community who relied on him. It was more than a journal, it was a testament. As they scanned the pages, something shifted within the group. The bravado started to evaporate, replaced by an undeniable respect for this man before them. They were looking at values, history, and the legacy of survival. Awareness blossomed, a secret that could turn their intentions upside down. I'm just a farmer, Charlie said, voice low but steady. No different than the soil that gives me my crops. Tony felt his grip on the knife loosen. He wasn't just standing in a field, it was the heart of a man guarding the legacy of his life. There was courage embedded in every fiber, a silent power. The intimidation they intended to exert flipped back onto them like a game of chess. One thug muttered, still caught in denial. Charlie stepped forward. Because every choice has consequences, this doesn't have to end badly. The tension was thick, full of threads that could snap. With the heart of a warrior, Charlie turned to the entrance. I'll give you one chance to leave my land, boys. For what felt like an eternity, silence swirled around them. The moonlight danced like playful spirits across the loose earth. Perhaps it was the weight of his words, or maybe they saw the depths of the resolve behind his gaze. One by one, doubt crept upon them until they knew they had no choice but to turn around. Days turned into weeks, and whispers of Charlie's courage began to echo through the town. The farmer they thought was just a shadow transformed into a legend, a man defending both his home and the stories of those who came before him. The mob slowly drifted into the darkness, while Charlie returned to the fields, standing tall as ever. The saga of that one night became a symbol, a reminder that sometimes strength resides beneath the simplest of exteriors. As for Charlie, he carried on, knowing that even when life felt like an empty field, with his spirit ignited, he would never truly be alone. In the end, the farmers of the world who tilled the soil were more than growers. They were storytellers, each haunting image embedded in the heart of the land. As long as they stood their ground, the sacred stories would echo through the ages, reminding them that even in the darkest of moments, courage shines the brightest. The moon hung low over the quiet fields, casting an eerie glow on the small farmhouse that sat at the edge of town. It was an ordinary night, yet the air felt charged, like a thunderstorm brewing just beyond the horizon. Over in the shadows, beneath the gnarled branches of an old oak tree, a group of men gathered, their faces hard as stone. They were the local mob, the kind of men who made their living on the edge of darkness, skirting the line between power and fear. Let's pay a little visit to old Charlie, Tony, the fly Adario suggested, a smirk on his face. His voice was tainted with mockery, as if Charlie's modest life was something to be ridiculed. "He's just a farmer." The others laughed, their laughter harsh against the quiet night. But it was the kind of laughter that hid trepidation, a flicker of doubt that maybe they were underestimating him. Charlie was no ordinary farmer. He was a man who had tilled the same soil for decades, a man of determination and strength, a man with a history buried deeper than the roots of the crops he tended. As they approached the farmhouse, Charlie was inside, unaware of the storm brewing outside. He sat at his kitchen table, surrounded by decades of memories, the flickering light of an old lamp illuminating dusty photographs and faded letters. Each piece told a story. His wife's laughter echoed through the halls of his mind. His daughter's childhood antics danced like fireflies around him. The warmth of nostalgia wrapped around him like an old quilt. But tonight was different. A shiver raced down his spine, an instinct honed by years of hard work and late nights under the stars. He glanced out the window, feeling the prickle of unwelcome eyes on him. Shadows moved like ghosts across the moonlit fields, creeping closer and closer. He stood up, calm yet alert, the weight of responsibility heavy on his shoulders. Charlie wasn't just a farmer. He was a guardian of his family's legacy and a keeper of ancient wisdom. Hidden within the walls of that farmhouse lay a secret dating back generations, a truth ingrained in the land itself. Meanwhile, the mob stopped just outside the front door, feigning bravado. One thug sneered, leaning against the doorframe. They laughed again, their voices rough as gravel, but doubt seeped into their laughter. Tony pushed the door and it creaked open with an ominous groan. Inside, the soft light wrapped around them like a vice. There stood Charlie, tall and steady, his frame silhouetted against the glow of the kitchen. Unlike the thugs, he possessed the calm of a man who has faced storms before and knows how to weather them. Charlie's voice was low and steady, each word like a stone dropped into the stillness, creating ripples. The men faltered, they were expecting fear, submission. What they found instead was a man who looked them straight in the eye, unyielding. "Just came to have a chat," Tony said, though his bravado was starting to crack. Charlie stood tall, the weight of his ancestors in his bones. "This land has given me everything," he said slowly, measuring his words like gold. The air shifted. Tony's bravado started to slide as he sensed the power radiating from the unassuming farmer. "You can hand it over willingly or it can get messy," he threatened, pulling out a knife that glinted in the pale light. Charlie felt his heart race, but he held his ground. He asked, voice steady despite the tension hanging thick between them, "You don't know the half of what this place is built upon." A flicker of confusion crossed Tony's face. He shifted, and the other men edged closer, curiosity mixing with their bravado. Charlie stepped back, revealing an old tapestry hung against the far wall. It was frayed at the edges but rich in detail. "This is my family's history." His hand brushed over the fabric as if touching the hearts and souls of those who came before him. The mob exchanged glances, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. They had come expecting a weak farmer, a man easy to intimidate. Instead, they were confronted by the strength of legacy and the stubbornness of the human spirit. "The history embedded in this land is deeper than you can imagine," Charlie continued, his voice growing stronger. "You may think you stand in power, but I stand on the shoulders of giants." Tony hesitated, the knife trembling slightly in his grip. "So what?" Charlie's eyes burned with an intensity that was both fierce and unwavering. "What you don't understand is that with every attempt to take what's mine, you're not just fighting me, you're challenging a lineage that would never back down." Time seemed to slow as the mob sensed a turning point. The bravado that had carried them into the farmhouse began to crumble beneath the weight of Charlie's resolve. Charlie asked, stepping closer, his voice unwavering, "You're not just threatening a farmer." Flicker of doubt crossed Tony's face. "Maybe we can work something out," he suggested hesitantly, though the words felt foreign like a thief in the night. Charlie shook his head, feeling a surge of courage wash over him. "There's nothing to work out." It wasn't just defiance in his voice. It was the undeniable truth of a man connected to his roots, standing firm against a tide of darkness. The mob's bravado began to wane. They didn't come prepared for a battle of wills. They came looking for an easy target. This wasn't a game they wanted to play anymore. This farmer was more than just the sum of his parts. He was every ounce of strength, every drop of sweat that had built the soil around him. As seconds ticked by, an unspoken decision hovered thick in the air. Tony lowered his knife, glancing back at his crew, confusion and fear mingling on their faces. "We don't need this," he muttered, stepping back, already plotting a retreat. The whispers of legacy began to drown out their thoughts, pulling them into the shadowed corners of doubt. Charlie watched as they retreated, the tension dissipating into the cool night air. The adrenaline faded back into quiet resolve, leaving behind a swirl of determination. He felt that ancient strength course through him, the whispers of his ancestors mingling with the wind. Outside, the mob shuffled back into the night, their bravado replaced with a sense of foreboding like a darkness they couldn't brush off. They had come with plans of conquest but left with something much greater, a realization of the power behind steadfast roots. Inside the farmhouse, Charlie returned to the kitchen table, heart steady, but the weight of protecting his legacy lingered. He looked at the tapestry, tracing its seams with a gentle finger. It was more than just fabric, it was his guide, the stories of those who had come before him filling every corner of the room. Weeks passed. News of the encounter spread through the town like wildfire. Charlie became a figure of resilience, embodying the spirit of those who had fought and persevered long before him. The townspeople began to recognize him not just as a farmer but as a guardian of tradition, the man who took a stand, who stood up to darkness with the power of family history behind him. The mobs may have thought he was alone, a simple farmer defending his land, but they had no idea what lay beneath the surface. It was a secret woven into the very fabric of the earth he tilled, a strength inherited, a bond with the past that gave him unyielding resolve. In time, Charlie became a beacon of hope, teaching the next generation that true strength comes not just from the tools you wield, but from the stories you carry. He taught them that the most powerful weapon against fear isn't a knife or a gun, it's the courage to stand firm, to protect your legacy, and to nurture the roots that hold you steady. As long as he stood, he would carry the hopes of his ancestors with him, turning the land into a living testament to resilience. In a world full of shadows, Charlie had found his light one rooted deeply in the soil, nourished by love, and brimming with untold tales that would dictate the course of his future for generations to come. The sun dipped low over the quiet farmland, bathing everything in a warm, golden glow. It was a picture-perfect evening until a distant rumble disturbed the peace. A dark cloud of dust billowed along the dirt road, growing larger as it approached the old farmhouse. The unmistakable sound of tires crunching gravel filled the air, and soon, a truck screeched to a halt in front of Charlie's property. Charlie stood at the edge of his field, hands resting on his worn jeans, brow furrowed in curiosity. His gaze fell on three figures stepping out of the truck, their silhouettes looming against the setting sun. They were no ordinary men. The shadows of danger trailed behind them, Tony, the fly, Adario, and his crew. Renowned for chaos and control, they were the kind of men who filled the void where fear reigned. "Looks like trouble," Charlie murmured to himself, a subtle tension curling in his chest. He straightened, shoulders squared, knowing instinctively that this wasn't just another evening on the farm. Just a few weeks ago, Charlie was minding his business, tending to his crops, focusing on the earth and the promise it held. But over time, whispers had crept into the small town about shadowy deals and debts owed. Rumors swirled that Charlie's farm, a sprawling land of diverse crops and the product of blood, sweat, and tears, might be valuable to the wrong kind of people. Little did they know, Charlie was much more than a simple farmer. As the three figures approached, a chill swept over the fields. Tony's cocky grin never wavered, even as he licked his lips in anticipation. Well, if it isn't Charlie the farmer," he called out, feigning joviality. The sunlight glinted off Tony's sunglasses, making his intentions hard to read. Charlie stood firm, eyes narrowed. "Oh, come now," Tony replied, swaggering closer. "Just a friendly visit." There was a harrowing undercurrent to his laughter. The other two men joined in, eyes scanning the property, eager and hungry. Panic stirred faintly in Charlie's gut, but he masked the fear, drawing on the steadiness of the land around him. He had worked every inch of this farm with his own 2 hands. There were secrets buried here, deeper than any roots. "Listen, boys, whatever you think you're looking for, you won't find it here," Charlie said, his voice calm but firm. The golden sun cast long shadows behind him, framing him like a rugged statue of resilience. "Don't be naive, Charlie," Tony shot back, the humor draining from his voice. "We know better. You might think you're alone out here, but we've got eyes everywhere. Let's cut to the chase." Charlie's mind raced. This was not a matter of simply defending his crops. It was about protecting something much bigger. He took a deep breath, remembering the stories passed down through generations. Secrets that could change everything. "You're barking up the wrong tree," he said, defiance etched in every word. At that, Tony's patience wore thin. "You think you're some kind of hero out here." He stepped closer, his crew following suit, their energy crackling like a live wire. As they advanced, Charlie straightened, a sense of resolve flooding through him. He knew there was strength in honesty, and the roots of his ancestors ran deeper than any criminal could fathom. "You don't know the history of this land," he said quietly, a steely glint in his eye. "It's not just dirt and corn to me." Tony chuckled dismissively, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his expression. He mocked, crossing his arms as he rolled his eyes. But the distance between them felt electric, charged with every unspoken truth. "My grandfather fought for this land," Charlie declared, his voice rising above the tension. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows that flickered like ghosts behind him. A familiar warmth settled in his chest, a reminder of the sweat spent and the storms weathered. Charlie knew that blood, sweat, and tears had built this land into something sacred, something to stand for. Tony felt the air thicken. He had expected fear, submission, but found strength instead. The laugh faded from the others' faces. Unease settled in, a tension rising like a storm, and Tony shifted nervously. Charlie's demeanor shifted. He stepped back towards the farmhouse, gesturing to the open door. "You want to know what I'm sitting on?" Tony asked, perplexed yet intrigued. Charlie smirked slightly, knowing the power he held. "You think I'm just a farmer. You think I'm alone out here." As Tony hesitated, peering at his crew who exchanged looks of uncertainty, Charlie's heart raced. He had kept the secret buried for years, a relic of a time when men like him had to be ready for anything. But now it was time to reveal what lay beneath the surface of this farm. Leading the way into the house, Charlie moved knowingly. The air inside was thick with the scent of aged wood and cherished memories. He directed them toward a hidden door in an old pantry. The door had the faintest of creaks as he pulled it open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The flickering light from the kitchen played tricks on the shadows, making the walls wiggle like the anxious energy in the room. "Down there," Charlie said, his voice steady. Tony's arrogance resurfaced, but his bravado was marked by uncertainty. Charlie glanced back at him, eyes glinting with a decisive spark. Not just any secrets. He took a deep breath, recalling the warnings from his grandfather. With a quick motion, he flicked on a switch, illuminating the staircase. The walls were lined with photographs, historic documents, and faded letters that told the story of a lineage steeped in hardship, resilience, and triumph. Charlie turned to face the 3 men now stepping cautiously into the light. "Welcome to the heart of my legacy," he said, his voice echoing against the cool walls. The mob stood frozen, eyes wide as they took in the collection, each piece heavy with meaning. Documented struggles, maps of land once fought over, portraits of ancestors casting long shadows over their past. The pride embedded in each item resonated deeply, almost tangibly. Tony whispered, caught between arrogance and awe. "Because courage is often buried beneath layers of soil," Charlie replied, stepping forward. He could see realization dawning on their faces. Tony's bravado faltered. He wasn't just threatening a simple farmer, he was facing a lineage. Charlie added, voice low but unyielding, "This isn't just a farm." The silence that followed was heavy, a weight that pressed down on all of them. The mob had come expecting resistance, expecting to intimidate, but here they found something deeply unsettling. A man standing shoulder to shoulder with history, fortified by tales that ran much deeper than money. Tony glanced back at his crew, eyes reflecting a mixture of anger and understanding. He asked, his bravado flickering like a candle in a strong wind. Charlie stood taller, aware that he had tipped the scales for good. "You walk away now and leave this place alone," he said firmly, "or you face what generations have endured to keep it safe. This land is an embodiment of courage." The men exchanged glances, their confidence wavering like shadows under a fading sun. They hadn't signed up for a confrontation drenched in the weight of hundreds of years. They had underestimated Charlie, the farmer they believed was alone. "Let's go," Tony finally murmured, backing away slowly, his earlier arrogance crumbling. As the three men retreated, stepping into the biting night air, Charlie could feel the tension dissipate, each of them now aware that they had lost a battle they never thought they'd be fighting. Days turned into weeks, and the word of Charlie's newfound legend spread through the town like wildfire. The farmer with a secret, they called him. People began to see more than just a man out there working the fields. They saw a guardian, a protector of not just his farm but the rich history it represented. Though Charlie still tilled the land, every dawn was now filled with something deeper. He became a symbol of resilience, not just for himself, but for anyone who faced a challenge that felt insurmountable. The whispered stories from his ancestors echoed through the fields, providing strength and inspiration for the generations to come. The mob may have thought Charlie was just another man, another farmer in a world filled with shadows. But the depths of his spirit reminded everyone that true power lies in a rich heritage, in the courage to stand tall against the storms, and in the secrets of the earth that nourish a legacy. As the sun rose week after week, Charlie remained anchored to his land, rooted not just in the soil, but in the untold stories that would continue to rise like a phoenix, breathing life into the past and guiding the way for the future. It was a truth that would never fade, a legacy fueled by the very heart of the earth itself. The sun dipped low over the fields, a fiery orange ball sinking into the horizon. The last light of day flooded the old farmhouse, casting long shadows that danced over the porch. Charlie, the farmer, wiped the sweat from his brow as he surveyed the land he had nurtured for decades. To anyone passing by, he was just an ordinary man, the kind who woke before dawn and spent long hours working the soil. That's what most people thought. But tonight, things were about to change. A rumble of engines broke the stillness, pulling Charlie's gaze toward the dust cloud approaching on the dirt road. His heart sank as he recognized the familiar, menacing shape of the mob's vehicles. Tony, the fly Adario, was at the wheel, flanked by two of his enforcers. They were like wolves, always circling, always hungry. "Not again," Charlie muttered under his breath, his heart racing. Just 2 weeks ago they had warned him to sell his land or face the consequences. But Charlie wasn't the kind of man to back down. He may have been alone, but he carried the weight of generations on his shoulders. As the truck screeched to a halt, Tony hopped out, swaggering toward the farmhouse. He called out, voice dripping with false cheer. The two enforcers slouched behind him, eyes scanning the surroundings like predators sizing up their prey. Charlie stood at the edge of his porch, arms crossed, unwavering. He tried to keep his voice steady, but a flicker of anxiety slithered through him. Tony laughed, but the menace was plain. "Heard you've got something valuable on this here land." Behind that grin, Charlie saw a glint of greed that sent a shiver down his spine. Charlie had built this farm from the ground up, carving out a life with every drop of sweat. He wasn't about to let some thugs take it from him. "You're barking up the wrong tree, Tony. I don't have anything you can use," Charlie replied, voice firm. Tony's expression darkened and the air around them grew heavy. "We're not just here to chat, old man. We know there's something out here, something worth a lot of cash." Against the backdrop of a setting sun, it felt as if everything began to compress, a pocket of tension where breaths held fast and bones ached. But Charlie wasn't listening to their threats. He had a secret. A hidden strength lodged deep within this land, one he had kept safe through generations. And now, as the night stretched forth, that secret bubbled to the surface. He stepped down from the porch, his heart steadying. "Charlie," said, easing into a slow smile. The mob took a step back, caught off guard. They were expecting fear, maybe even a flash of desperation. But they saw a man tapping into something deeper, something ancient. "Why don't you come inside?" he said, gesturing toward the doorway. Tony's voice was low, his bravado faltering slightly. Charlie led them through the door into the dimly lit living room. Old photographs adorned the wall's images of past relatives, faces lined with age and hardship. For a moment, Tony's confidence wavered. This wasn't just a house. It was a testament to the blood, sweat, and tears that had been shed on this land for generations. As they ventured further inside, Charlie motioned toward a small door at the back of the pantry. "You want something of value." Tony's voice edged toward panic, the bravado slipping from him like an unguarded secret. Charlie smiled again, knowing their underestimation of him was about to backfire. "If you're looking for money or valuables, you might be disappointed." Tony looked back at his crew, and uncertainty crept in like fog through the fields. We didn't come here for exactly," Charlie said, cutting him off. "You came in thinking you could intimidate a simple farmer." He opened the door to the hidden area, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The air was cooler here, heavy with the weight of untold stories and memories. Charlie flicked on a light switch, illuminating the small space lined with shelves. But what caught their attention wasn't the dust. It was the artifacts, each one telling a story of grit and resilience. "Welcome to the heart of my legacy," Charlie said, stepping aside so they could see. Framed documents outlined the history of the land, showcasing a lineage of farmers, each one fighting against the odds to hold on to what belonged to them. He asked, pointing to a rusted plow. "That belonged to my great-grandfather. He used it to break ground when nothing else would grow. He was chased off his land more than once but always returned." Tony stared, caught between disbelief and the creeping shame of their earlier bravado. He muttered, still trying to salvage his arrogance, "Stories don't mean anything to us." Charlie stepped closer, closing the gap. "But what if those stories are all we've got? What if the spirit of the land rises up to defend it?" The atmosphere crackled, tension building like a storm. For the first time, doubt flickered in Tony's eyes. Anyone could push a simple farmer, but how many would dare invoke the memories of those who came before him? "This isn't just my fight," Charlie continued, feeling the energy shift. "It belongs to everyone who tilled this soil, who lived and died on this land. Our ancestors laid their hearts down in these fields." Charlie could feel the tide turning, the weight of generations pressing in on Tony and his crew. They had ridden hard for power and intimidation, but faced with a force they hadn't expected, the bravado began to melt away. This wasn't just a confrontation about land. It was a contest of spirits, an unwritten social contract steeped in history. "Well?" Tony asked, finally cracking under the emotional pressure. Charlie took a deep breath, fighting against his racing heart. "I want you to think about what you stand for. You want this land, fine, but it will not be taken through fear." Uncertainty shifted among Tony's crew as the weight of those words sank in. The bravado that had carried them through countless shady deals began to dissipate against the legacy Charlie represented. Charlie pressed, "This farm holds a spirit that does not break easily." Tony took a step back, hand instinctively reaching toward his shoulder as if searching for a weapon that was no longer necessary. It was a prison of privilege and choice, one that had kept him blind to the essence of humanity around him. "Just walk away, Tony," Charlie said, voice low but unwavering. "Let it go." Confusion danced behind Tony's eyes. But as the shadows from the past flickered in the dim light, he could feel the presence of Charlie's ancestors looming behind him, a sculpted chorus echoing through the walls. With one last glance at the artifacts lining the shelves, the crew began to retreat. They stepped back into the cool evening air, shadows stretching far beyond them. They had thought Charlie was just a simple farmer, an easy target to shake down. Instead, they had stumbled upon a truth woven into the very fabric of the earth, a legacy stronger than any of their threats. As the dusk settled around him, Charlie felt a weight lifting. He had faced off against not just common thugs but ignorance. This was his home, his legacy, and he had emerged victorious. What felt like a small victory against the mob transformed into a powerful moment of self-worth, one rooted deep within the soil. It reminded him of something an old friend once told him: "You don't have to raise your voice to be heard." Weeks passed, and the whispers about Charlie's triumph traveled through the town. People started to gather at his farmhouse, seeking wisdom and history. They wanted to know about his battles, his struggles, a man who defended not just his land but the spirit of all those who had come before him. In a world that often sought to erase the roots of history, Charlie stood resolute. He entertained their questions, shared his stories, and invited them to contribute their own. The farm became a sanctuary of stories, a hub of community where people learned their worth came from their connection to the land and each other. No longer just a farmer, Charlie became a living testament to resilience, a symbol of hope that radiated through the fields. What started as an unwanted confrontation transformed into a gathering of souls who realized they, too, had stories worth telling. Through it all, the mob never returned. They had underestimated Charlie and the legacy he embodied. And deep down, they knew they couldn't face the heart of the land without feeling the consequences of their actions, a timeless truth resounding in their ears. As the sun set week after week, Charlie remained rooted to the earth, anchored not just in the soil but in the echoes of history, a guardian of tales that would continue to shape lives for generations to come. And so he did, forever entwined with the stories that brought life to the land he cherished. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the fields as Charlie wiped the sweat from his brow. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of freshly tilled earth and the distant sounds of birds singing their evening lullabies. But there, at the edge of his farm, a rumble of engines broke the tranquility, sending a pulse of unease racing through him. Dust rose along the dirt road, and as the figures came into view, his heart sank. 3 men climbed out of a truck, their movements confident, almost predatory. Charlie recognized them immediately, members of the local mob. The reputation of Tony, the Fly Adario, and his crew had preceded them, a cloud of fear that hovered over the town. He stood alone on his porch, the sun framing him like a lonely sentinel watching a storm approach. "Charlie," Tony's voice rang out, jagged and sharp against the soft evening hush. What did they want? Charlie scanned the horizon. He had fought for everything he had, pouring every ounce of love and labor into this land. The farm had been in his family for generations, a patchwork of memories stitched together by hardship and resilience. It was not only his livelihood, it was his legacy. "Come on, Charlie," Tony taunted, a grin stretching across his face. Behind him, his 2 associates chuckled, men who thrived on intimidation. Taking a deep breath, Charlie stepped off the porch and walked toward the men, heart pounding. He asked, his voice steady but firm. "We've been hearing things," Tony replied, leaning casually against the side of the truck. Charlie felt a surge of indignation. "I'm not hiding anything." Tony chuckled, a low, menacing sound. "Not just a farm, Charlie. People say you've got something worth a lot of money buried under all that dirt. And if you're smart, you'll hand it over before things get." Charlie clenched his fists, anger bubbling beneath the surface. These men thought they could intimidate him. But they didn't understand the history of the land or the secrets woven into its very fabric. "This land is my family's, earned through hard work and sacrifice," he said, trying to hold on to his composure. Tony straightened, his playful demeanor fading. "You're making a mistake, Charlie. There's more at stake here than you realize." His voice trailed off, leaving an unsettling silence hanging in the air. Charlie took another breath, tasting the dust stirred by their truck. "I said I'm not interested in selling." For a moment the tension was palpable, swirling around them like a thick fog. Charlie stood his ground, every inch of him rooted to the land he loved. But something deep within him stirred, a secret that had lain dormant for too long. "Fine," Tony finally snarled. "You'll regret this." With that, they climbed back into their truck, leaving the dust swirling in their wake. Charlie felt the adrenaline leave his body, replaced by a steady determination. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared, he locked the door to the farmhouse and stepped into the dimly lit living room. The walls were lined with pictures of his ancestors, their faces etched with both joy and sorrow. They had fought for this land, bled for it, and he had no intention of letting it go. Charlie moved to the back of the pantry, his fingers tracing the worn wood of a hidden door covered by bags of flour. The door creaked as he opened it, revealing a staircase that led down into darkness. Here lay his secret, a legacy passed down through generations that had the power to protect him if he chose to wield it. He descended the stairs slowly, heart racing as he flicked on a light switch. The damp air greeted him, heavy with the scent of earth and memories. Shelves lined the walls, filled with old jars and faded documents. But it was the box in the corner that caught his eye, an old, rusted trunk that had been hidden for years. Inside was a collection of artifacts, one more precious than the next. Each piece told stories of resistance, survival, and a legacy that had, in the past, kept danger at bay. There were old maps, blueprints of the land, documents outlining legal battles fought to maintain ownership, and photographs of the family buried deep within the heart of the farm. Charlie sat on the floor, the trunk open before him, and felt a quiet fire igniting in his chest. This was his inheritance, the history of struggle that had created his reality. He had buried it away, but now it was time for it to see the light again. Suddenly, he understood. He would not fight alone. He would reach back and draw strength from every ancestor who had ever worked this land, every family member who had faced down adversity. He would wield that strength as a shield, and if it came to it, he would protect what was his. The next morning, Charlie emerged from the farmhouse with renewed purpose. He set to work on the fields, but this time he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Late in the afternoon, as he plowed a new section of land, a shadow fell across him. Charlie turned, and there stood Tony, flanked by his enforcers, their presence casting a dark cloud over the sunlit field. Charlie remarked, wiping the sweat from his brow. "This isn't over, Charlie," Tony said, his tone sharp like a knife. "You're playing a dangerous game by refusing us." Charlie straightened, refusing to back down. "Do your worst, Tony." There was tension in the air again, the wind stilling as if the earth itself was holding its breath. But this time, Charlie felt different. The courage that had ignited within him infused his words with power. He was not just a farmer fighting to protect his land, he was a steward of history, and that history didn't fade easily. Tony suggested with a sly grin. Charlie shook his head. Tony's grin faltered, frustration creeping up his throat. "You think you're safe here, huh? We know people in town, and you're bound to wind up on our radar again." Charlie took a step forward. "You don't know who you're dealing with, Tony. My family has fought for this land before." With that, Charlie turned back to his work, the roar of the tractor drowning out Tony's growl of frustration. He could feel their eyes on him as he continued to plow, each motion echoing through the field like a heartbeat. Days turned into weeks, and the tension between them continued to simmer beneath the surface. Charlie worked the fields, pouring his heart into the soil, while the mob stalked from the shadows, always watching, always waiting. But a shift was coming. Charlie began to connect with others in the small town, sharing stories of the struggle and the rich history that lay buried beneath the surface. People began to rally around him, inspired by his determination. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was awakening a collective spirit. One evening, a farmer from the neighboring plot came by, a friendly face named Tom, who had been involved in a similar fight to protect his land. Sitting on the porch as the sun sank low, they shared tales of hardship, laughter, and loss. "I know what it feels like to be alone against the odds," Tom said, his voice soft but resolute. Charlie nodded, feeling the weight of community lift his spirit. "It's more than just land." And as word spread, more and more farmers joined their cause, a united front against the approaching storm. Charlie felt a flicker of hope igniting anew. Together, they would band together, protect one another, and redefine the landscape of their community. Then, one early morning with the sun rising over the fields, Charlie heard a familiar engine rumbling in the distance. This time, it wasn't alone. As he stepped outside, he saw Tony's truck pulling up, but this time it was flanked by others, men and women from neighboring farms who had rallied around him, standing shoulder to shoulder. Charlie squared his shoulders, heart pounding with both fear and resolve. This was it. But this time he wasn't standing alone. As Tony stepped out of the truck, flanked by his men, he looked around, surprise washing over him. "What's this?" He sneered, but the bravado was thin, threads of uncertainty weaving through. "Tony," Charlie called out, voice steady. "You may have thought I was alone, but you've got it all wrong. We are not going to be intimidated." The air shimmered with tension, the murmurs of the crowd behind Charlie rising like a wave. For a second it felt as if time froze, the weight of their shared history swelling around them. Tony's expression darkened and he turned to his crew. "You think these farmers matter?" But the tide was shifting. The farmers raised their heads, defiance burning in their eyes. "Our roots run deep," one of them shouted. Tony laughed, but the sound cracked like a fragile facade. Charlie stepped forward, locking eyes with Tony. The words hung in the air, alive and crackling with energy. Movement stirred amongst the farmers, a surge of bravery bubbling to the surface. Realizing he was outnumbered, Tony's bravado wavered. "You don't know what you're getting into," he spat, but the edge of confidence had dulled. In that moment, desperation crept in and he turned to his men, signaling for them to retreat. "We'll be back for what's ours," he threatened, but there was something hollow in his voice now. As their truck rolled away, Charlie felt the weight of 1,000 hearts lifting. They had stood together, linked by shared history and the unyielding strength found on the land they loved. From that day forward, the farmers joined forces, sharing resources and knowledge. They felt a renewed sense of purpose, each field now a battlefield conquered, each harvest a celebration of their collective strength. They transformed the farm not just into a home, but a sanctuary, a legacy protected by the unbreakable ties of community spirit. Together, they wrote their own stories, interwoven with tales of struggle, resilience, and triumph. As the seasons turned, the sun shone bright over the fields, illuminating the warmth of unity that ran deeper than the roots of the crops they tended. The mob may have thought Charlie was alone, a simple farmer facing insurmountable odds, but what they failed to see transformed the landscape forever. Charlie's struggle had awakened something greater, a community fortified by history and a determination that stretched beyond the battlefield. In standing together, they crafted a legacy stronger than any storm, a powerful reminder of the ties that bind and the courage that rises when hearts unite against the tide. And so, as the sun settled on another fruitful day, Charlie stood tall, surrounded by friends with spirits entwined and hearts anchored firmly to the land they cherished. The secret whispered through the fields was simple. Together they were unstoppable. The sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. The old farmhouse sat at the edge of sprawling fields, its weathered wood and rusting roof a testament to years of hard work. Charlie, the farmer, wiped the sweat from his brow, his calloused hands aching from a long day spent tending the crops. To anyone passing by, he was just a simple man, a solitary figure working the land. But beneath that humble exterior, he harbored a secret one that would soon come to light. A low growl of engines broke through the evening stillness, and dread pooled in Charlie's stomach. He looked up to see a cloud of dust rising from the dirt road. The shadow of a truck loomed closer, and seconds later Tony, the fly Adario known for his ruthless ways, climbed out, flanked by 2 of his enforcers. The air crackled with tension and Charlie felt it in his bones. Tony's voice, a mix of mockery and command, broke through the quiet. Charlie stepped forward, determination sparking in his chest. He asked, keeping his voice steady. Tony chuckled, his eyes glinting like a predator's. "Just a friendly visit. We've heard you've got something hidden under all that dirt." Charlie's heart raced. He knew immediately what they were after. This land wasn't just farmland, it held a legacy, one that they had no right to take. "There's nothing for you here," he replied firmly. Tony's grin widened, but there was a danger lurking beneath it. "Come now, don't be coy. We know better." The 2 enforcers, silent till now, exchanged glances, their eyes scanning the farmhouse. But Charlie stood his ground, feeling the strength of his ancestors rising within him. He had tilled this soil for years, pouring every ounce of sweat and love into it. This was his home, and he would not let it fall into the hands of those who didn't respect its value. "Listen to me, Tony," he said, voice low but unwavering. "You're barking up the wrong tree." Tony's expression darkened, and for a moment the jovial act faded. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. This isn't just about you or your little farm." Charlie felt a chill run down his spine. He didn't like the direction this was headed. "I've worked hard for what I have." At that, Tony stepped closer, anger radiating from him. "You might think you're some kind of hero out here standing alone against us." In that moment, Charlie felt his heart racing. Would this end in violence? Would he fight alone? There was a flicker of fear, but he quickly quelled it. Behind every crop he grew and every seed he planted lay stories of persistence and tenacity, the tales of his ancestors who fought for this very land. He wasn't as alone as they thought. "Get off my property before I call the authorities," he threatened, holding his ground. Tony smirked, clearly unafraid. He turned to his men, signaling them to head back to the truck. As they climbed into the truck, the men shared a laugh that hung in the air like smoke. Charlie felt a mix of anger and adrenaline as they drove away, tires kicking up dust. This wasn't over. He needed to protect what was his. That night, as the moon rose high, casting its silvery glow over the fields, Charlie sat on the porch, staring into the darkness. A single thought echoed in his mind: they think I'm alone, but I have a secret. He rose from the porch, moving toward the back of the farmhouse, where a small door led to a sublevel he rarely accessed. It was a hidden space, cluttered but filled with relics of his family's past. With a deep breath, he opened the creaking door and descended the narrow staircase. Inside, the air was cool and musty, the scent of aged wood wrapping around him like an old friend. He reached for an old lantern, flicking it on. As the light flickered to life, it illuminated shelves filled with jars, old tools, and dusty boxes. But it was the large trunk in the corner that drew his attention. Charlie knelt beside it, tracing his fingers over the rusted latch. This trunk held the history of his family, a history they had fought to protect. Inside lay documents, maps, photographs, and artifacts dated back to when they first settled on this land. It detailed their struggles against policies that sought to limit their ability to farm, the battles fought against corrupt powers that tried to take away their rights. With a rush of adrenaline, he opened the trunk, revealing its secrets: family heirlooms, records of land ownership dating back over a century, proof that this land belonged to him and his forever. This was his weapon, the strength of his lineage, and the defense against threats like Tony's. As the lantern light danced around the room, a sense of purpose surged through him. He would not allow the struggles of those who came before him to be in vain. They had cultivated this land, and now he would do everything in his power to protect it. The next morning, Charlie rose with the sun, determination propelling him forward. He worked the fields, but today he planned to gather support. He knew the townspeople admired that he stood strong against intimidation. They needed to know the truth about him and the legacy behind their shared land. Later that week, Charlie organized a meeting at the local community center. Flyers posted around town attracted attention, and the night of the meeting, a crowd gathered, a mix of farmers, families, and friends. Charlie stood at the head of the room, heart racing as he gazed out at them. "Thank you all for coming," he began, voice steady. Murmurs filled the room. "We've all heard the stories," one farmer spoke up. "Tony and his crew have been harassing folks." Charlie nodded. "And they think they can break us, intimidate us into submission. But we have something they don't: a history, a legacy. We come from generations of fighters who worked this land." One farmer raised a hand: "But how do we battle against them?" Charlie took a breath, feeling the weight of responsibility for each face staring back at him. "That's why I'm here. I found something in my family's history that can help us. It's documentation proving our rights, our ownership." The room fell silent, anticipation hanging thick in the air. He saw the spark ignite in their eyes, a collective recognition that they were not alone, that there was strength in unity. "I have records dating back over a century," Charlie continued. "Things that show our lineage and our perseverance on this land, proof that we are its rightful guardians. But we need each other to fight against this menace." A woman stepped forward, her voice warming the room. "If we all pitch in, if we stand together, they won't stand a chance." The crowd erupted in support, voices rising together in a chorus of agreement. In that moment, Charlie felt a wave of relief wash over him. They weren't just a collection of farmers anymore. They became a community united by shared purpose and destiny, their fight intertwined with Charlie's. Days turned into weeks, and the farmers worked tirelessly to prepare for whatever might come next. As the sun flourished in the sky and harvest approached, they organized themselves, sharing crops, pooling resources, and discussing their strategy. But with hope came uncertainty. One evening, as Charlie was closing up the barn, a foul smell permeated the air. He stepped outside, only to find Tony's truck parked once more at the edge of his property. This time, however, the atmosphere felt different. News of their unity had reached Tony, and now he looked more furious than ever. Tony shouted, stepping out of the truck, a scowl etched across his face. "You think you can evade us, form an army against us?" "We're not afraid of you, Tony," Charlie shouted back, anger flaring up within him. Tony sneered, his eyes narrowing. "You think a bunch of farmers with a few old documents can take down men like us? No, Tony, you've made the mistake. You've underestimated our strength, our resolve." As the tension escalated, Charlie felt the familiar pulse of fear begin to rise, but this time he wasn't alone. Nearby, he caught sight of his neighbors, farmers gathering in solidarity, standing resolute behind him. "Enough," Tony spat, fists clenched. "I don't have time for this. You'll regret this decision." Without another word, Tony climbed back into his truck, a smirk on his face, but Charlie sensed a change in him. The confidence was wavering. As the truck rolled away, Charlie felt the energy shift. They had stood their ground, and the unity they had forged only strengthened their resolve. Weeks passed, and as the harvest drew closer, Charlie and his neighbors prepared a communal feast to celebrate their hard work and resilience. They set up tables beneath the old oak tree, laughter filling the air like music on a warm summer night. It was a reminder that no matter the struggles ahead, they had each other. But that very night, as joy filled the air, trouble lurked in the shadows. Tony and his men plotted their next move, furious over the community's defiance. They would not rest until they subdued Charlie and the other farmers who dared to challenge authority. The next day arrived under a threatening sky. Dark clouds rolled in, obscuring the sun and casting ominous shadows over the fields. As Charlie tended to the crops, he could feel the weight of something heavy settling in, an unshakable sense of dread. Then suddenly chaos erupted. A group of masked men stormed onto the property, seizing the crops, cutting down what they could. Panic ensued as Charlie shouted for his neighbors. He yelled, running toward them. But the masked men surged forward, determined to intimidate and destroy. They swung tools, knocking over farm equipment and throwing seeds to the ground. It felt like all hope was slipping away. Was this the end for them? But as they pushed Charlie back, a fierce roar erupted from behind him. His neighbors surged forward, standing shoulder to shoulder against the aggressors. One farmer bellowed, gritting his teeth and pushing back against the mob. A sense of hope swelled as the farmers rallied, fear transforming into furious determination. They fought for their land, their families, and their legacy. Charlie felt their spirit surge around him, empowering him to charge forward and take back what was rightfully theirs. As they confronted the mob, something remarkable happened. Charlie recognized the strength that his ancestors had passed down through generations, igniting a flame within him. This time, he fought not just for himself, but for the community that had rallied behind him. With each step forward, they pushed back against the masked intruders. The shouts of resistance grew louder, resonating through the fields as neighbors joined in the fight. Fueled by adrenaline and rage, they defended their land and their unity, forging a bond that would not break easily. Finally, with a determined shove, they pushed the masked men back, forcing them to retreat. As they stood triumphant, hearts pounding and faces flushed, Charlie felt a powerful sense of victory surge through the air. In the aftermath, when the dust settled and darkness fell, they gathered together, arms draped over each other's shoulders. They had proven their strength, their resilience, and their willingness to stand together against the odds. As they celebrated their hard-earned victory, Charlie knew this moment would echo through the ages, a reminder that unity transforms fear into resilience. The farmers became legends in their own right, their tales woven into the very fabric of the land. They had forged a legacy stronger than any threat they could face. Time passed, and while the threats from the mob faded, the spirit of unity remained. The community thrived, bound together by a shared history and understanding. Each farmer tended to their fields, their heads held high, and their hearts entwined in pride. Charlie looked around one evening, enjoying the sun setting on another hard day's work, and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. They had taken the fight, turned it into strength, and defended what belonged to them together. The mob may have thought Charlie was just a simple farmer, alone on his small plot of land, but they learned a crucial lesson. True strength lies in unity and courage, fueling a legacy that cannot be extinguished. In the heart of that fertile land, the stories of bravery, resilience, and community would continue to grow roots tangled deep and strong, thriving with every passing season. The night was still, the moon casting a pale glow over the sprawling fields like a watchful eye. Nestled in the heart of that landscape stood an old farmhouse, weathered yet resilient, surrounded by acres of corn that swayed gently in the night breeze. Charlie, the farmer, was out working late beneath the stars, feeling the earth between his fingers as he had done for decades. Little did he know, trouble was lurking just beyond the horizon. A deep rumble broke the tranquil silence, a sound familiar and foreboding. Turning his gaze toward the road, Charlie squinted into the darkness. A cloud of dust rose high as a truck rolled closer. Instinctively, his heart quickened. He knew who it was before the truck came into view. The notorious mob led by Tony the Fly Adario, men draped in shadows with intentions just as dark, had come calling. They pulled up, engines rumbling to a stop. Charlie straightened, tension coiling in his chest. He called out, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. Tony stepped out, flanked by two burly enforcers, a grin plastered across his face, a predator savoring the moment. "Oh, Charlie, you know we just want to be friends," he said, swaggering toward the porch. Charlie narrowed his eyes. Business. He felt the weight of the land around him, the generations of farmers who had tilled this soil before him. This was not just his livelihood, it was his legacy. "Now, don't be like that," Tony said, his smile fading. "Word on the street is that you've got something valuable hidden away." Charlie felt a rush of adrenaline. What could they possibly know? He'd worked this land slowly, steadily, day by day. But even if they were asking about money or valuables, they'd never understand what this farm really meant to him. "Leave now, Tony," Charlie said, trying to keep his voice calm. "You're barking up the wrong tree." Tony's grin returned, but it was more menacing this time. "You think you can stand alone against us? You're just one man." Without a second thought, Charlie stepped off the porch, fists clenched. "You think I'm afraid of you? This land is my life." A tense silence hung in the air, the wind whispering through the leaves as Tony's bravado momentarily faltered. But the moment passed quickly, replaced by a cruel glint in Tony's eyes. "We'll be back, Charlie." With that, he hopped back into the truck, leaving behind a cloud of dust and a knot of dread in Charlie's stomach. The confrontation weighed heavy on Charlie as he made his way back into the house. He leaned against the door, staring out into the night. They thought he was alone, but they had no idea. He had a secret, one that he had held onto tightly, buried deep within the farmhouse. Charlie made his way to the hidden door at the back of the pantry, carefully concealed behind crates of supplies. He had discovered it as a boy, and it had been a haven for stories that echoed through generations. As he pushed it open, the darkness greeted him like an old friend. He descended the narrow staircase, his lantern flickering to life, illuminating the walls lined with shelves. Inside were family heirlooms, old photographs, and documents that spoke of a history often marred by the threat of those who sought to strip him bare. But at the heart of it was a rusted trunk, one that had been there since his grandfather's time. With trembling hands, he pried open the latch. Inside lay a trove of artifacts, legal documents proving ownership of the land, journals that traced the family's history of hardship, and a concealed weapon passed down through generations, a reminder that family had fought for what was theirs. This wasn't just a trunk. This was a beacon of resilience, a testament to courage. Tomorrow he would bring these records to the community. They could face Tony and his men together, armed not just with weapons but with knowledge, a collective strength rooted in unity. But he needed to find allies, and quickly, before it was too late. The next day, as the sun climbed high in the sky, Charlie set out toward the homes of his neighbors. He knocked on doors, one by one, each time feeling a flicker of hope ignite. Each farmer listened intently to his words about the confrontation, and slowly he could see the strength in their eyes as they grasped what was at stake. By evening, Charlie gathered everyone in the old barn, the air thick with anticipation. Farmers from miles around had shown up, each one bringing their stories, their fears, and a newfound sense of strength. "I know you've all felt the weight of Tony and his crew," Charlie began, scanning the faces illuminated by the lantern light. "But we're not alone. This land belongs to us, and together we can protect it." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. One farmer piped up, "But what if they come again?" Charlie raised a hand, silencing the crowd. "We refuse to be intimidated. I have documents proving our rights to this land. We will confront them, but we must be prepared. I've gathered evidence of their threats and our heritage." As the evening wore on, laughter mixed with determination. Plans were laid, friendships forged, and encouragement filled the room. For the first time in a long while, Charlie felt a warmth spreading through him hope. They weren't just farmers. They were a family bound by land, history, and the roots of resilience. Word spread quickly through the community, and the next few days were filled with activity. They shared knowledge, pooled resources, and even began to prepare for the possibility of confrontation. Charlie felt strengthened with every conversation, realizing that together they were more than just individual farmers. They were defenders of a shared legacy. But darkness loomed as well. Rumors in town whispered of Tony's crew plotting their retaliation. Each passing day sent a chill down Charlie's spine. He couldn't shake the feeling that the calm before the storm was about to shatter. One night while Charlie was working late, he heard a car engine outside. He stepped out onto the porch, heart racing. The headlights pierced through the enveloping darkness, illuminating the entrance to his property. Tony's truck roared up the driveway, followed by another vehicle. Charlie's stomach dropped. He felt the familiar surge of adrenaline as he scanned his surroundings. Were his neighbors ready for this? He stepped back into the house, silently reaching for the trunk, feeling the familiar cold metal of the weapon within. Then he heard it, a loud bang against the front door, followed by the sound of voices. It was Tony's unmistakable sneer. "Open up!" Charlie took a breath, heart pounding. He could run, hide, or confront them, but running would mean giving in, and he couldn't do that. Not now. Taking one last look at the trunk, he stepped into the hallway, heart racing, ready to face the men who thought they could intimidate him. The future of his family was at stake, and he wouldn't allow fear to dictate his actions. As he pulled open the door, the chaotic light from outside flooded in, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. There was Tony, flanked by his crew, their expressions a mix of arrogance and anger. Tony spat, a smirk curling on his lips. "You think you're safe?" Charlie squared his shoulders, defiance burning in his eyes. "I'm not backing down, Tony. This is my land, my legacy." Tony laughed, the sound harsh like gravel. "Proof. Documents. You think that will save you?" As the tension thickened in the air, Charlie saw the glint of steel in one of the enforcer's hands. The fear he had felt earlier began to rise again, but this time he refused to let it take hold. Suddenly, a figure stepped out from behind Charlie Tom, a neighboring farmer who had come to his side. "You'll have to get through us first," he said, locking eyes with the mob. A crowd of farmers gathered behind Charlie, standing shoulder to shoulder, ready to defend what was rightfully theirs. In that moment, the mob realized they were outnumbered, and the rage emanating from Tony was palpable. But as the standoff lingered in the air, a sharp crack echoed in the stillness. A shot rang out in the night. Time seemed to freeze. Everyone turned toward the source of the noise, confusion swirling in the air. Charlie's heart raced, and as he glanced at his neighbors, he knew this would change everything. Tony shouted, pulling out his weapon, eyes darting around as everyone scrambled for cover. The situation had escalated beyond anything they had anticipated. Amid the chaos, Charlie's mind raced. This was no longer just a fight for land. It had transformed into a battle for survival. And as he looked around, heart pounding, he realized he needed to act fast. Then came another sound, the distant rumble of engines approaching. Were those reinforcements for the mob or allies from the community? Charlie had to make a choice, and he had to make it now. In that split second, he felt the weight of centuries of struggle, the stories of his ancestors whispering in his ear. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for everyone who had ever stood on this land. With a surge of courage, Charlie shouted, "We can't let fear win." As Charlie shouted those words, the world around him exploded into chaos. His neighbors rallied behind him, refusing to back down, standing tall against the impending storm and ready to fight for their future. But what would happen next remained a mystery. Would they prevail, or would the night lead them down a path they could never return from? The storm was brewing, and the secret Charlie had held so long was about to reveal its true power. If only they could survive this night.